How's everyone doing out there? I hope you're having a great day. And welcome to this episode of Just Start Walking and You Get There. I'm your host, Carrie Braggs, and this is my guest today, Mr. Kent Sanders.
Howdy.
Now, before we get into the show, I always like to let everybody know what this podcast is about. It's about we have dreams, we have hopes and things that we want to accomplish, but sometimes we get overwhelmed with all of the thinking on how do I get from point A to point B. And so with Just Start Walking and You Get There, we just kind of talk about the process, taking it one step at a time, one day at a time. And before you know it, you'll be there and you'll be achieving your dreams and goals one after the other. So if that sounds enlightening and encouraging to you, this is the place to be. So without further ado, let us get into this podcast. So this is Brother Kent Sanders. Little background of our relationship. He was my art teacher here in college at St. Louis Christian College. And fun fact, now see, I saved this for the show because this is something you didn't even know. If it was not for this gentleman here, I would not be sitting here with this podcast.
Very cool.
Because I don't know if you remember, it's back at the end of, I believe, like December 2014. I was trying to get a podcast going, didn't really have all of the information on it, and John Michael Brown pointed me to you. And
gotcha.
We sat down, we talked, set up a meeting with you.
I do remember
you, that. And you gave me the information on Dan Miller, and there was another gentleman, but I never got past Dan Miller.
Gotcha.
I got his book, I listened to his podcast, and he was just so inspirational to me that he just got me thinking outside of the box with so many different things that that following year I took a leap. You know, I took a leap from my job that I was at for 15 years to pursue working with at-risk youth. That's the calling that God had put upon my heart. But you were very instrumental in that because Dan Miller, he just kind of opened my mind and to see the different things, as well as with your book, The Artist's Suitcase. That book, I didn't know what to expect because you are an artist. And so I was looking at it like it's more to do with music.
Right.
But you are very well-rounded with music and movies and just looking at how the artist thinks and what all of that entails. And so you were very inspirational to me.
Well, very
so
cool.
I just want to
appreciate
let
that.
everybody at home know this gentleman got me started.
So it's my fault.
Yes, it's his
I'm
fault.
to blame.
So if it doesn't go well, blame him. But if it does, blame him. So I felt what better way than to come back to the source and let everyone see, how sometimes someone does something and they're like, no, it started with this teacher or it started with that coach. And, get behind the scenes to see, hey, who helped guide me in the right direction. So I guess I'll just get into the interview now because, you have a podcast now yourself, and I just was wondering, so I sat up and I thought about it, and it's like, I wondered when was it that you found a love for music and started playing instruments?
Gosh, that was from a really early age. Even from junior high, from when I was probably 11 or 12. Whatever age it was 6th grade, I don't remember how old I was. I was in the band at school, and my brother was a drummer, and so I just thought, well, I don't know what else to play, so, I was in the percussion section, and I still remember how in school you buy these snare drums.
Right.
They're in these kits, and, it all breaks down into one sort of a suitcase thing. I still remember that very clearly, having my brother's old snare drum kit. In fact, I haven't thought about that in years, now that I mention it. And was in the band and loved it, and was in marching band, jazz band, choirs, musicals, productions, the whole, I was doing the whole creative thing all through junior high and high school, and really all through college as well. So just from a very young age, I'd always been involved in that. However, something I was thinking about recently is that, school was very good, for, I think, helping me to become a better musician and just to develop discipline as an artist and all that stuff.
Okay.
But a huge impact was my church. I grew up in a small country church in Potosi, Missouri, which is a couple hours south of here.
Right.
Very, very small kind of a country town. And I was thinking the other day how instrumental, no pun intended, how instrumental those people were in helping me develop as a person. I mean, they let me lead songs. Back in that day, it wasn't called worship leading or creative arts. It was called, song leading. And we would stand by the piano with the hymnal, and many times, you picked out songs right before church, so there wasn't a lot of planning involved.
Right.
When I got to be in high school, they let me preach, and a few times on Sunday nights, and I think once on Sunday morning. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that was really unusual. I mean, for a church to let
Yes.
young people really be involved like that,
Yes.
they were very good about that. So, just over the years, I've thought I'm really grateful for those people. And a lot of times we sort of write off small churches, and and I'm a part of a mega church now, so and obviously large churches can do a lot of great things, but
Right.
small churches can do great things too. And
Yes, it's more up close and
oh my
personal.
gosh, yeah, absolutely. So it's really been my whole life, I would say.
And so, was it just you and your brother who played instruments, or did you have other family members that were involved in things like that?
My mother was not really musical. She sang to me as a little kid. She would make up these songs like a lot of moms do.
Right.
My dad, I've only heard my dad sing maybe 2 or 3 times my whole life. So he's not really a musician to speak of. But my grandfather, my dad's dad, he was a guitar player and a singer.
Okay.
And my dad's mother, so my grandmother she would write poems, she would sing and all that stuff. So I think that's just kind of where it all came from, I assume.
Okay, so it's one of those skip the generation.
Yeah,
type
so to
things,
speak.
But
Yeah.
And so you said you from junior high on through high school and college and everything. And so then, I guess, when did you start teaching? When did that become something you were doing, teaching music?
Teaching music, I started probably in college. I mean, I started just not giving formal guitar lessons, but just teaching other guys what I knew.
Okay.
And, I wasn't a great guitar player. I mean, I could play good enough to kind of strum and lead worship, lead some songs, but I wasn't like a really finely tuned guitar player or anything like that. But I just kind of started teaching people what I knew. And one of the things that really got me interested in teaching was the church where I worked at after college. I worked there for 7.5 years. I was the worship leader there. And several years after I was there, people just started asking for guitar lessons.
Okay.
Because, I played every Sunday and I really tried to develop my skills as a musician. So I would give drum lessons to kids, I would give guitar lessons to people, and at one point we had so many people wanting guitar lessons, I would have to have a class.
Right.
In fact, I remember one time having 2 sections of this class, and we would do 3 services on Sunday morning. Then on Sunday afternoon, we would have 2 sections of a class for like 8 or 10 students each. And then we would have Sunday night service. So by the time Sunday night was over, it would be like, man, I just want to go crash.
Right, you were exhausted.
And it's hard to teach a class full of instruments, because you have some people who just are not getting it,
Right.
and are never going to get it. That's just the way it is. And some people who are picking it up fast. So it's really hard to teach guitar as a class, probably an instrument as a class, in my opinion. But that's the only way we could do it.
Right.
And it really kind of developed from there.
Okay.
And I felt a real satisfaction from doing that. In addition to leading worship and preaching and those kind of things, and that has a satisfaction of its own. But for me, teaching somebody something and seeing them develop because I've helped them do something, that to me is the most gratifying thing.
Right. And I can see what you're saying with that, because it's, actually seeing that you were actually able to transfer something over to someone else. I mean, and I feel that way sometimes too, whenever somebody might say they were encouraged by something, one of my podcasts, or something in a sermon, And that always makes me feel good to say, hey, I said something that helped someone. So it's a beautiful thing to to be able to know that it's actually helping change someone's life. So I can understand that feeling there. So I guess within that, so at this point in time, I know you said that it just started happening with everybody coming up asking you for a guitar lesson. At this point in time, had you got to the point where you were saying that, okay, this is the direction I want to go with my life, that I want to be a musician or be a worship leader and things like that? Or was it just kind of, this is what was going on at the moment?
It was, I would say it was putting into me this desire to do more teaching.
Okay.
And I mean, and just to be really, I guess, honest, typically in a church, my observation is that, and I don't know any other way to put this, but there can kind of be a shelf life for worship leaders. And that sounds like a very harsh thing to say, but that's just been my observation over the years in working with all kinds of churches and musicians and whatnot.
Yes.
Is that there's very few people who can stay in a worship leading position for a long-term time. And I used to sort of wonder, like, what's going on? Why is that? I think part of it is due to just the artistic temperament. Mm-hmm. And that creative people get bored doing the same thing year after year after year.
Right.
I know that was my own experience in that particular setting, and it was a wonderful church, but after a while you just start thinking, it's the Sunday services can be kind of a grind, and I think any pastor would say the exact same thing.
Right.
That it just starts to wear on you after a while. And creatively, I love the people at the church, but at that point I was getting ready to turn 30 many years ago, it feels like. And I just thought, I could stay at this church probably for a long time, but I love teaching and I love the challenge of that. I also had a couple of interns, which really put the drive in me to want to do more of that. So the opportunity came here at St. Louis Christian College to teach, so it just kind of all worked out to do with that.
So I guess, because I'm thinking, when did you come here? Because I was here 2009 to 2014.
Okay.
So
I came in 2004.
Okay, so you had been here.
Yeah, so this is my 14th year, crazily enough.
Okay. And I thought even within the class, it was one of those more things like I just really didn't know what to expect from the class and everything.
Most people don't.
Yeah, because that's when I'm just kind of like, okay, how is this going to go? But it did, I guess, allow me to bring out some of my artistic side, because I always do videos and I do gospel rap and things like that. So I remember for that class, I put together a video. It was a poem I had written for my wife, and I was working with the green screen, and so I played two parts in the video and put that together for the class and everything. And so that did just make me want to grow more and get deeper into those type of things. And so within that, once again, that was I guess, as you were saying, when you get those challenges or you see those opportunities, it just gives you a thirst for more of it. And so now with you, okay, you play instruments, you're teaching, you're a worship leader.
Not very often.
Occasionally.
Okay. I don't do that on a regular basis these days.
Okay, so, and also you are an author. So now tell me, when did that begin as far as you writing? Well,
it started, sometimes you see these movies or stories and they're like, well, when I was a kid it started. But that, in my case, it really is true. And this sounds like I'm making this up, but this is a true story. When I was in middle school, I had a teacher named Mrs. Tull. And, keep in mind, this is a small town school. This is not like, big city or anything like that. I had her for English all through junior high, which I think was kind of unusual. I had her for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade English. And, we would have these writing assignments and whatnot, and I always loved doing those. And I think I had a little bit of a talent for that. That was just kind of a natural bent of mine to want to express myself that way, through writing. And I remember distinctly one time she said, when you write your first book, I want you to dedicate it to me. And that she was a master teacher because she knew that was going to stick with somebody. I mean, how could you not remember that?
Right.
So literally, I didn't think about it every day, but for years, I would regularly think about that. And I just thought, man, that is so compelling. And when I write my first book someday, I will dedicate that to her. That was my thought. Well, for years and years, all through my 20s, I wanted to write a book. I would have ideas. I could go back and show you probably 5 or 6 what I thought were pretty good ideas for a book, but I just didn't know how to get started.
Okay.
I didn't know how do you really go from an idea to a complete book, and then how do you find a publisher for that, and what's the whole process, and it can be sort of a complicated deal. And I would always share these ideas with my wife, and she would listen very patiently and kindly, and then it got to be in my 30s, and I would generate more ideas for books. And I remember specifically, this has been probably 2013 or 14, I was talking about yet another book idea. We were in our kitchen at home, and I was sharing this idea with her. I don't even remember what the book idea was. And she kind of had this weird look on her face. And I could tell I couldn't tell if she was irritated or just sort of, she wasn't really listening or what the deal was. And I just said, you have a really weird look on your face. What's the deal? I'm like pouring out my heart to you, this whole idea for a book. And she said, at this point, we had been married 17 years at that point. She said, we've been married for 17 years at this point, and all these years I've heard you talk about writing a book. And at this point, I just don't think you're actually going to do it. You're just going to keep talking about it, but you're not actually going to do it, so I just kind of stopped listening to your ideas. And she, again, here's another female in my life.
Right, only a wife can put it.
Oh my gosh. There's three women in my life who've made a really huge impact on me as far as my wanting to write books. Number one was my mom, who has always been a huge encouragement, and is also one of my editors.
Okay.
And just a really great writer. Number two is my teacher from middle school, and then number three is, of course, my wife. And she told me that, and I think she knew that was going to motivate me.
Right.
Because at that point I thought, okay, this is a challenge now.
Right.
You cannot say that to me and then have me just sort of go lie down. So I got busy. And my first book actually was a very niche book. It was a short digital book on the app Evernote. I don't know if you've used that before, but it's like a productivity app.
Okay.
Basically, you store all kinds of information in it. You can access it on any device. It's for taking clippings from the internet or storing notes or taking screenshots or whatnot.
Okay.
But that was a book on using Evernote for pastors specifically, because it's been a huge help to me in my own life, and I just wanted to have a way to teach pastors how to use that, because it's such a great organizational tool.
Right.
So that was with actually a digital publisher. It was a very, very niche book, so I wasn't going to dedicate that to her. That just would seem kind of weird. But my next one, which was the Artist Suitcase book that you mentioned, that's what I thought, I got to dedicate this to her. And it was a really fun day when I was able to send her a copy of that in the mail. And then I got this very nice note back from her. And it was actually hard to track her down because she'd actually gotten remarried at that point.
Okay.
And it was just extremely hard to find her I happened to find her husband on Facebook and got in touch with him, and it was kind of hard, there was back and forth trying to communicate. And
right.
so it was like this manhunt to try and find my, old junior high teacher from 30 years ago. But it was worth it. The whole thing was worth it.
And I know she was just beyond proud with you writing the book and everything. So
I like to think she was proud on some level. Now, she may have told a lot of kids that over the years, for all I know. I don't know. And if she did, that's totally okay with me, because
because it's
instilling
still,
the dream.
Right. It's still encouraging them to chase their dreams and go forward. Now, is that the only book you've written thus far, or?
Yeah, I've done 2 so far.
Okay.
I've done a bunch of little short books, like for my website and giveaway things, that type of thing. But I'm currently working on the next one. It's sort of like a full-length book, yeah.
Okay. And I like how you went through the alphabet with the book. So it's like as I was reading, and it was one of those things to where once again I didn't know what to expect. And I like things like that because just like with movies, you know, a lot of times you don't like the movies where you're like, okay, I already know what's getting ready to happen. He's gonna shoot him and they're gonna steal the money. But you know, it was kind of like each chapter kind of had a life of its own. Because normally, you know, with the books there, you know, they're tied together. Each chapter has a different thought, but they all go together. But it's like with your book, it was like each one was like a different idea, you know, to where they just went along. And so I found that pretty interesting. So, you know, I do like that book. So
well, thanks, I appreciate it.
And that goes back to the, you know, the creativity side of things. And so now you had your blog first, and then you started your podcast. Did you start that last year, or has it been a few years with the podcast?
Well, my current blog, which is kentsanders.net, I've had that for I think 3 or 4 years or something. That's like my third or fourth blog.
Okay.
So I mean, I feel like, you know, if sometimes, you know, people see, well, like I brought a copy of it here. You know, people see something like, I don't know if I can get it out here. You know, and this is just a thin little book. They see something like this, you know, they see a finished product, and it seems like, oh wow, this is something that represents success for somebody. They've achieved something, and this is just a little small book. So it's not like the Grapes of Wrath or, you know, some big important work by any stretch. But people see this, and you know, it's easy to think, wow, this person has achieved some measure of success, even though that's I would consider this, you know, very small kind of a thing. But many times we don't see all the failures that came before that, and all the half-finished projects and things that did not go well. So anyway, my current podcast, which actually is on hiatus, and probably I'm not going to pick it up, and I'll explain why in a second. That's called Born to Create, and that's really just an audio blog, where it's audio versions of my written blog posts.
Gotcha. Okay.
The previous one was called The Artist Suitcase, obviously linked to this book, and that only lasted, I think, 37 episodes.
Okay.
I stopped doing that one probably 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
I would consider both of those podcast failures, actually, in the sense of I didn't really know what I was doing with them. I didn't have a clear direction for them. Gotcha. But I would consider them a success in the sense that I learned the systems for podcasting. I learned, you know, how to record and edit good audio, how to structure a podcast. You know, how do you interview guests? How do you write an intro for it? You know, basically, what are all the systems and the processes for doing it every week, so that it's not this huge stressful thing on your life. Well, it can still be a stressful thing, you know, because it's time consuming.
Right.
But I would consider it, and I would consider the book this exact same thing. I don't think this is a fantastic book. I think it's a pretty good book. It was my first sort of, well, it's really my second one, but it's the first book that I was really excited about. You know, the Evernote book I think was helpful, but I wasn't like really excited about that. It's like a productivity book.
Right. But I mean, and see, and once again, you know how sometimes we're our biggest critics, to where somebody else will say, hey, that was the greatest thing you put out, and you'll be kind of sitting there like, no, I think that was pretty bad because I didn't do this or I didn't do those things. And so I think even still it's one of those things that just the fact that you have a book, you know, is so many ways to look at it, because once again, it inspired me. And so it's one of those things to where, like you said, it didn't reach where you were going, or you didn't look at it on that level. But, you know, there are those out there who, once again, you said something that inspired them in that. And so, you know, it's somebody's out there encouraged by somebody. You have one right here. As you can see, I'm hearing all of this because of you taking the time to sit down and meet with me that one day.
Cool.
So, I mean, within that, so you say you're not going to pick that back up. So are you? Because let me say this, I can relate to what you're saying, because I kind of went around in circles from that time that me and you met over the past 2 years to actually get to this point. where the clarity came in, because it was the ideas were there, but it's like, okay, how do you start this and sustain this, and what direction do you go in? A lot of the things you were saying about interviewing people and all these things, it's like, okay, how do you get from point A to B to C? And so it was preparation behind the scenes till it just got to the point to where it was like, it's time to launch.
Yeah.
You know, it's time to launch, and I just jumped out there, and you know, God has been blessing everything. And so, what direction are you heading in now? Since you say you're not going to pick that up, do you have a new podcast in mind, or what direction are you going in?
Well, there's with the podcast specifically. We were going to launch this in March. Probably it'll be in April sometime now. But I'm starting a new show with a friend of mine, actually, who is a writer and an editor. And we're going to do a show, I think it's going to be called The Productive Writer.
Okay.
I think. I'm not totally sure about that, but we're still batting around some ideas.
Okay.
But it's basically focused just on writers.
Gotcha.
So we're, kind of what they call niching down, sort of in the business world. Instead of doing a general podcast on creativity, I'm going more narrow. And I want to focus on writers, but then I want to go even more narrow and focus on how do you be productive as a writer.
Okay.
Because you can, there's so many aspects to writing. It could be, and there's podcasts on all of those little tiny niches.
Right.
But I feel like my passion is really helping people to move from zero, to, okay, I want to write a book, or I want to be a writer, or I don't know where to get started, but I want to do this, to something that's finished and that you put out there, whether it's a blog or a book or even a podcast. Podcasts have to be written.
Right.
Even though it's an interview, you have to think of questions. You've got to write intros. You've got to do all that stuff. So writing is a part of everything.
Yes.
If you think about it, writing drives our whole culture.
Right.
You really don't encounter much of anything during the day that doesn't have writing behind it. Whether it's copywriting on sales flyers, or sermons, or lessons, or classes, or things that you encounter at work that are written, memos. People writing grant proposals. Everything is written. So that's a huge part of it. But the podcast will launch in a couple months, focus strictly on productivity, because that, I think, is the main issue for a lot of people that I talk to. Is it's not a matter of feeling. Or it's not a matter of not having motivation. It's just a matter of how do I actually get it done.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the big issue that I see.
Yeah, and that's it. And I agree with you. I kind of focus in a different area, to where I look at, like, it's the process. Excuse me. A lot of times when I would give someone advice, I may be sitting down talking with someone or counseling with someone, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, this is the situation, and I'm giving them spot on advice, and then they wouldn't take it, and then they would make their situation worse. Make it worse. And I would say to myself, why didn't they listen to the advice that was given to them? And then, God started to show me that you can't just tell somebody something and expect it's just to change, because they've been thinking a certain kind of way and doing things a certain kind of way for years. So there has to be a process on how to get from this thinking and this way of living to get to something else, to where when you do give someone that advice, they will take it and use it. And so that's the thing, that's kind of what ties in with this here, with the Just Start Walking, the process. So I totally agree with what you're saying, because you see that a lot of times if someone tells you, you need to exercise. Yes, I know I need to exercise, but I don't know how. I don't know what's going to be a productive workout. And so, like you said, that's where the productivity comes in, to say, hey, this is how it goes. And so that's something that I know I need myself, because I'm in the process of writing a book right now on this Just Start Walking, because this is, everything ties together with me, with from our conversation up to this point here, and it was just a matter of me. I was just learning things. So it started with you, where we had the conversation. I took your advice and I started listening to Dan Miller, and he enlightened me on some things, and I started seeing other things. Then I would read your blogs and listen to your podcasts and different things like that, to where, now I will say this about you: you have a lot of, you are very creative. I will say that, because once again, when I read your blog or listen to your podcast, it's my, you always have the process, and that's what I like, and that's what I need, because it's like, okay, you put the thoughts out there, and you just kind of, you're good at storytelling, to where you're telling the story. It's like, okay, let me see where he's going with this, and then you'll give you give your list of things and everything, and tie it all back together. So I've gotten a lot out of everything that you're putting out, and so I just encourage you, just as you said, to keep doing that, because I know I'm going to be looking for it. And
Cool.
even still with, I know you said you're not doing the other podcasts anymore, but you are those things still going to be up for everyone to view and
Yes.
things like that? Okay, so so are you still doing the blog as well?
I am. I haven't been as regular as I would like recently, but yes, that is still going.
Okay, so I guess, do you have any information that you would like to give to the public, that they can get in contact with, find your works and things like that?
Absolutely. Yeah, just go to my website. It's kent@kentsanders.net. No, I'm sorry, that's my email address.
All right.
Kent@kentsanders.net, and then of course my website is just kentsanders.net.
Okay, and you said maybe a couple of months, and you'll be looking to start the other podcast?
A couple of months. That's one of several projects I sort of have in the works. The problem with, I think the problem with a lot of us, and I wrestle with this a lot, is that we have too many projects going at one time. So later this year I'll launch the next book, and I also am working, and I hate to even say this publicly because it may not come to fruition, but I'm pretty sure it's going to happen, but I'm working on my first instrumental guitar album.
Okay.
Which is something that has nothing to do with writing, but recently I've been really convicted about the fact that I haven't been using any musical gifts for a while, like consistently. I mean, basically my work here at the college has shifted. When I first came here, it was very music centric, and over the years it has shifted away from that to a great degree, whereas now I'm doing a lot of different things, and I just haven't been nearly as involved in music stuff here at the school. And just because of my schedule, my freelance work, my teaching, family, I haven't been a part of any sort of regular music team. And lately I just realized I really miss that. And I, picked up my guitar. I hadn't played consistently in months and months, honestly.
Oh, wow.
I picked it up and I just thought, I really miss this. The guitar used to be a really important part of my life. But you know how it is, when you kind of go through life and you have increasing responsibilities and family and all that stuff. And I thought, I need to find a way to do this again.
Right, to get back to it,
Yeah.
and I can understand what you're saying, because you are gifted in many different areas, and I see that sometimes, to where one may get put on the back burner, and this one is, you're pouring your time into it, like you say, something to happen where you're like, hey, I haven't been over here doing this in a while, and that love for it picks back up. So I can understand what you're saying, and so I look forward to that as well. But I mean, at least you're keeping busy in your area. It could be one of those things to where other things in life are just have taken you away from them, period. But you're going from one to another, so that's always a good thing, because you're still in that area putting out something, whether it be the blog or the podcast, and working on the book and looking for the album. And so I'm going to be looking for a few things later on this year. I'm looking for a few things to put out this year myself. So, hopefully we can motivate and inspire one another to actually get it done. So
Absolutely.
So are there any other things on the horizon that we should know about?
Those are the two main things. In fact, I'll share with you a little bit about the book that I'm working on. This has been a long time coming. And, it's funny because, in the Artist Suitcase book, I talk a lot about, your processes and sort of getting structured with your time and more disciplined with your time. And that's been something I've really actually wrestled with. You know, it's kind of one thing to put it into a book. It's easy to say, okay, here's 5 ways to do this or that, but it's really hard to live it out sometimes.
Right.
And what I have been struggling with the past 2-3 years, and this is all, the last few months I've really kind of course corrected and back on track with this again. But after I wrote this book, I wanted to write a book that dealt with what I felt like was kind of a framework for creativity.
Okay.
You know, I wanted to have in my own mind a lot of clarity about what is the creative process exactly. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times we associate creativity with sort of chaotic activity, or people, you know, we look at highly gifted people and we just think, well, they're just naturally more talented, or they're gifted and I'm not, and
right.
and we kind of leave it there. When I just don't think that's the case. You know, I've seen so many people who have achieved great things not because of some inborn amazing talent, but because they've worked really hard to get there.
Right, and yeah, and I can understand that because that's something that I try to. You know how they always talk about somebody else sees something in you
Mm-hmm.
normally before you see it, and you're like, what do you mean? You think I can do this, or you see this in me, and you're just kind of like, I don't see it. And it's like that. You know, I try to do that with my children. Lately, I've really been trying to get them to be creative, to think outside of the box, just to be thinkers, period. Because it's like, you know, a lot with this generation, they just kind of move forward with what's going on as compared to, you know, I don't want to be a part of the crowd, or I want to just create something. There are a lot of good things out here, and you know how sometimes you might be like, hey, he wrote a book. If I could write a book, I would, you know, write this and just even get that spark going. So I can see what you're saying with getting that creativity going. So once again, I will be looking forward to that, because I always, anything I can get to help me get where I'm going and help me better myself, I'm reaching for it and grabbing for it. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule today to sit down for this interview. Our audience out there, I hope you all enjoyed this interview and that you learned a lot. And please make sure that you look up, could you give them the information one more time for the blog and the podcast?
Yes, the blog is kentsanders.net, and that's just, it's spelled just like it sounds, KENTSANDERS. No relation to Colonel Sanders.
Right.
Kids always tease me about that. It was either, you know, the jokes they play on their name, it was either Clark Kent, you know, like Superman, or Colonel Sanders is one of the two.
Well, yeah, I get the bragging. Hey, dude, you brag all the time, and I'm like, really? You couldn't?
Is that the best you can do?
Right. Now, is the book available on either one of your sites, or
it is?
Where's this? Okay.
That's actually on Amazon, and it's on my website. So the easiest place to do it is just go to Amazon. It's right there. This is in print, ebook, and actually audiobook form as well.
So it's 3 different formats you can get it in. It is a great book. And I'm telling you, it will be very helpful for you, bringing out that creativity and just taking that artist inside yourself to the next level. So we thank you all for tuning in. Brother Sanders, I thank you for being my guest today. And you all have a blessed day as well. And don't forget, go check out his blog and go check out his podcast as well. You will truly be blessed by it. So you have a blessed evening, and you take care.